What's up everybody, it's Joe here with Joseph Blake Photography, and in today's video we have the details now about the upcoming M4 MacBook Pro refresh. They're out, they're coming in a week. Let's talk about all the details, including that new M4 Max processor. What's up everybody, I am Joe. This is my channel, Joseph Blake Photography. I am a portrait and landscape photographer here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And on this channel, we talk about tech and news and gear and tips and tricks and reviews and all of the things that relate to creating content, whether it's here on YouTube or elsewhere in social media or really anywhere else that you're making cool stuff. If that's the type of thing that you're into, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if at the end of the video you think that this has been informative for you, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. Okay, enough about me, socials down below, as well as a list of all of my gear. Let's go ahead and talk about these new laptops and their chips. Also, socials linked down below and a list of all of my gear, but that's enough about me and the channel. Let's jump into talking about these laptops and their very, very interesting processors. So we've been doing videos all week about the Apple events, non-events. This really does look like a deconstructed Mac event. And honestly, I think that gives them really three distinct opportunities. Number one is to give us as much screen time as possible for John Turnus. This guy is now like the star of the show. Number two is the fact that it lets them take up a lot of the press during the week. So instead of having one day that could potentially fizzle out over a day or two, we're gonna get successive days of coverage, both in the tech space, the creator space, and really everywhere that people are interested in learning and knowing about Mac products. And third, and this is the part that I don't love, is that it gives them multiple opportunities to talk about
Apple Intelligence,
Apple Intelligence,
Apple Intelligence, Apple Intelligence, Apple Intelligence,
Apple Intelligence.
So even though we had the same chips and the same features and the same information, iMac on Monday for the iMac and Tuesday for the Mac Mini and today for the MacBooks, each of those had an Apple Intelligence infomercial kind of smashed in to talk about the hardware, even though the Apple Intelligence information hasn't really changed from day to day. We've got new information every day about the chips, about the hardware on the products, and about other things, but the Apple Intelligence information really hasn't changed, and it's not different from product to product. Honestly, it's not even different from products that we have now. This is an M1 Max MacBook Pro, and while it might not be as fast, it still will have access to most of the features of Apple Intelligence that are now being reported as a part of these M4 products. But I've talked at length about my disappointment about Apple Intelligence, so let's jump into talking about these laptops and their chips specifically. On paper, it looks like we're getting 3 laptops and 3 chips. We're getting a 14-inch MacBook Pro, a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and a 16-inch MacBook Pro, along with an M4, an M4 Pro, and an M4 Max. But when you start talking about the M4 Pro and the M4 Max and the 14 and the 16-inch, the SKUs really start to diverge and we start getting some interesting, complicated, and kind of frustrating tiering, right? To start, let's talk about this entry-level 14-inch MacBook Pro. So this 14-inch MacBook Pro, it replaced the old 13.3-inch MacBook Pro that had the touch bar. It starts out at $1,599, and as we've seen with the rest of the M4 Max, it comes with a base of 16 gigabytes of RAM. But just like the Mac Mini and the $1,499 version of the iMac, this version of the 14-inch MacBook Pro is coming with that standard M4 chip, but this one does have 10 cores on the CPU side, 10 cores on the GPU side. 120 gigabits of memory bandwidth, and configurable at either 16, 24, or 32 gigabytes. It also tops out at 32 gigabytes. And on the storage side, you can do 512, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabyte, nothing higher than 2 terabyte options. Comes in silver and space black, and all of the models have been updated to also include a brighter screen. The standard screen, I believe, was 600 nits in SDR, and then it would burst up to 1600 nits for HDR content. You can now do sustained brightness of 1000 nits for standard SDR, which is like your UI elements and surfing the web and all that sort of thing, which will be really, really helpful in those brighter environments if you're outside or if you're near a window and you're worried about glare. Also, all of these offer the nano textured glass, and that 14 inch is still coming with your standard ports. It's got MagSafe, it's got 3 Thunderbolt 4 USB-C ports, headphone jack, HDMI 2.1, as well as the SD card slot. Now, when we move up to the 14 and the 16-inch models, that's where you get access to the M4 Pro and the M4 Max processors. So again, this lineup gets just a little bit tricky when you start talking about specific. So this lineup starts to get a little bit trickier when you start talking about specific features and specifications. While screen real estate and brightness are the same and the number of ports that you get are the same, one big difference as soon as you move up to the M4 Pro or M4 Max, similarly to the Mac Mini, is that with the M4 Pro and M4 Max chips, you do get Thunderbolt 5. So it's still only 3 ports, but they are Thunderbolt 5 compatible. And again, while the screen is the same, the M4, the M4 Pro, and the M4 Max have different capabilities when it comes to plugging in external displays, which for a MacBook is a pretty big deal. So these display configurations are pretty varied and they can honestly get a little bit confusing. So it says that with the M4 and M4 Pro, you can support up to 8K at 60 Hertz or HDMI 4K at 240 Hertz. You can also do 2 6K displays at 60 Hertz or one 6K 60 Hertz display over Thunderbolt with one 4K display at 144 Hertz over HDMI. Your mileage may vary. The M4 Max can do 3 displays at 6K at 60 Hertz and 1 display at 4K at 144 Hertz. That's 4 displays total. It can also do 6 displays at 6K over Thunderbolt at 60 Hertz and 1 display at 8K at 60 Hertz over Thunderbolt, or 1 display at 4K at 240 Hertz over HDMI. I don't know. It sounds like you'd be able to plug in a lot of stuff. The HDMI port will support one 8K at 60 or one 4K at 240 as its max. But I think that's kind of the determining factor, is depending on if you use that HDMI port for 8K or 4K 240 and then plug something else into Thunderbolt, that's when things get kind of a little bit more, I don't know, it's a lot of different configurations. But don't worry, it gets more complicated. Okay, so now let's talk about the chips themselves, the M4 Pro and the M4 Max that are coming in this particular version of the MacBook Pro. So the M4 Pro is the same chip that came in the Mac Mini. You have a 12-core variant and a 14-core variant. The 12-core version comes with a 16-core GPU, and the 14-core CPU comes with a 20-core GPU. And in the 14-inch MacBook Pro, those both come standard with 24 gigabytes of RAM. That's the base amount, and 512 gigabytes of storage. But the M4 Pro in the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which comes with 24 gigabytes of RAM standard, can only be upgraded to 48. There's no 36, there's no 64, there's no 96, there's no 128. So if you're getting a 14-inch, you get either the 12-core CPU or the 16-core CPU, and you get either 24 or 48 gigabytes of RAM. And it's the same for the 16-inch as well. You're limited to 24 or 48 gigabytes of RAM on the M4 Pro chip. That's in the 14-inch and the 16-inch. Also on the M4 Pro, you're limited to 4 terabytes of storage. So it's 2 terabytes on the M4, it's 4 terabytes on the M4 Pro. And that's a departure from the Mac Mini, where whether it was the 12-core or the 16-core variant of the M4 Pro, you could do 16 up to 64 gigabytes of RAM and 512 up to 2 terabytes of storage. You just don't get those options on the 14 or 16-inch MacBook Pros with the M4 Pro, and I don't really understand why. Like if you're doing build to order, why don't you have more feature options? They're just grayed out. So now, moving over to the M4 Max, the big chip. This chip also comes in 2 flavors, a 14-core and a 16-core. The M4 Max at 14 cores and the M4 Pro at 14 cores don't seem to have a whole lot of difference. However, there are a lot of other features in this chip that do make it a lot different. One being the fact that the base model 14-core CPU comes with 32 cores of GPU power, whereas the M4 Pro 14-core CPU comes with 20 cores of GPU. So that's 60% more GPU performance in the Max version of this chip. But for a couple bucks more, you can upgrade to a 16-core CPU, so 2 cores more than the base M4 Max and the top-end M4 Pro. And you can get in that one 40 GPU cores, which is double the top end of the M4 Pro and 4 times the number of cores that you get out of the M4. But these are the first configurations that we see with this chip. And while it does light up the ability to select 8 terabytes of storage, you're locked to 36 gigabytes of RAM if you go with the 14 core. So there are some other features that come with the Macs that might prompt you to go that direction, where you might say, well, I don't need the additional CPU or GPU cores. I'm going for those double decode encode engine blocks. I want that power. And so you opt for the 14 core CPU with the 32 core GPU. You're locked to 36 gigabytes of RAM. You can go all the way to 8 terabytes of storage if you're crazy, but you're locked to 36 gigabytes of RAM. There's no upgrade. That's it. That's the base. That's all you get, which is weird. And if you upgrade to the 16 core CPU with the 40 core GPU, you don't get 36 anymore. All you get is 48, 64, and 128. So you really don't have the ability to configure different components. It's just, you're just going up. It's all just up. And so if you want some differentiation, you just have to spend considerably more money. And considerable it is. The 48 gigabyte RAM version of the 16 core Macs with the 40 core GPU and 1 terabyte of storage, which is the standard base, is $36.99. Now, I know prices go up over time, but this is a 32 gigabyte, 24 core GPU, 10 core CPU, M1 Max MacBook Pro in the 14 inch. And this one was $32.99. And so I was able to find I wanted the Max chip because I wanted those encode decode engines, but otherwise I wanted everything else kind of middle of the spec, better than the Pro, but not the top of the Max. And you don't really have the ability to configure that. They really don't want you to go middle road. It's either low or super high on this product. Now, we talked about memory bandwidth being a big upgrade from the M4 to the M4 Pro. Same thing going from the M4 Pro to the M4 Max. You're going to be going from 273 megabits per second up to 430 megabits per second. But if you go with the 16 core version of the M4 Max, you end up with 546 gigabits of memory bandwidth. One thing that both variants of the Max chip come with are those double decode engines. Basically, they doubled up the amount of decode encode that you get in there. So you get all the hardware acceleration for things like ProRes, ProRes RAW, H.264, H.265, HEVC, AV1 decode, but you get double the encode decode. So those hardware accelerated components, there's actually 2 of them in the M4 Max, and that's both in the 16 core and the 14 core. You also get different charging options with all of these laptops. So the M4 model of the 14-inch MacBook Pro comes with a 70-watt charger. The 12-core M4 Pro comes with the 70-watt charger, but the 14-core comes with the 96-watt charger. But the 16-inch version, whether you get the M4 Pro or the M4 Max, both come with the 140-watt. You can't get the 140 watt with the 14 inch. You either get the 70 or the 96. And then when you go up to the 16 inch, you get the 140. It's just, there's so many different SKUs here. Also, the M4 that has the 12 core CPU and 16 core GPU, you can't get that in the 16 inch version, only in the 14 inch version. When I started making this video, I thought, oh, I'll make a chart. I don't have time. This chart is too big. There's too many. There's too much. It's not just how many SKUs, but also what you can and cannot get with build to order and what's available even from the start. It's weird. Now, they've upgraded the webcam in all of these, so 12 megapixels with center stage compatibility. And I do appreciate the fact that we're getting Thunderbolt 5 on all of the Pro and Max models, that we're getting the 3 Thunderbolt 4s on the standard M4 model, and that all of them have the beautiful screen that's now been upgraded to 1000 nits of SDR. But this is a complicated group of products. This is a complicated process, and there's going to be a lot of people that won't know for sure which version they should buy or which specs they should buy. And even once they do kind of figure that out, they may not be able to access all of those because of other limitations in the build-to-order system. What I'm curious about is this a limitation based on marketing? You can get it on the Mac Mini. So is it a power thing? Like, why would they omit the ability to purchase these products? Now, if you didn't get the nano textured glass, but you just maxed out everything else, this laptop, the 16-inch version, can be $7,200. But if I were to configure this particular device as a build-to-order right now, I would go with 1 or 2 terabytes of storage. I'd be going with about 64 gigabytes of RAM. I would get the higher-end CPU and GPU, and I'd be around $4,200 to $5,200. which is only $350 a month. It's just a small car payment. I joke, but I love these laptops. I really do love. My MacBook Pro has been the greatest computer that I have ever bought. I'm excited for the update. I'm actually really excited for that 1000-nit SDR. That is actually pretty cool. And the double decode engines on the Macs with that 40-core GPU. They claim 2.5 times faster than the M1 Max that I have in here. So getting close to something that would potentially be considered an upgrade, although this one's still running perfectly well and I'm happy to keep it for as long as I possibly can. But let me know down in the comments what you think about this build to order strategy and this new product. And if this is the kind of thing that you're into, I'd appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. And if you thought that this video was informative, go ahead and hit the like button. Again, social media links all down below, as well as a list of all the gear that I use, both here in the studio and when I'm out doing photography. But that's it for me today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.